Hey friends, it's Jillz and welcome to the first ever Fireside series, a new series where we sit by the fire and just chat. I want to talk about topics on here that are just like a little bit more casual, that will be very unscripted, basically no notes, just me like talking how I would casually talk to a friend. It's late at night and I've got my little sleepy time drink here, and we're gonna chat about why sometimes we don't feel good enough or like we are not doing good enough in life. And obviously this topic can be very complex, and there can be a huge component of this to just like having low self-esteem and dealing with trauma and old wounding and things like that. But I want to talk about this topic from a whole other direction, because I do think that there's a whole other part of the game that isn't really talked about, and it's something that's been on my mind lately. So I've talked about this before on my YouTube channel, and I know I've talked about this in my Quantum Leap video, but to manifest what we want and to get what we want and to become the person, the type of person that we want to be, we have to normalize it. So for example, if we want to start making $100,000 a year, we have to start normalizing $100,000 a year. And we won't ever really get there and be able to stay at that level of $100,000 a year and have the capacity for that wealth to come into our life until that feels normal to us. Or if you want to manifest a loving, safe, kind, romantic relationship, if you've only ever known like toxic relationships, like that's just the situation which you grew up in, toxic relationships are normal to you, then in order to have that wonderful, healthy relationship, you have to normalize that for yourself before you actually get there so that you can get there, right? Like that's a part of the manifestation process. That's a part of the growth process. Whether we realize it or not, that's what we're subconsciously doing. But what happens when things feel normal is that they just feel average. They don't feel exceptional, they just feel average. And so when you step into that new version of yourself, because you were able to normalize it, that's why you were able to get it. But because you normalized it, when you get there, it still just feels average. And because you normalize that $100,000 a year, when you get there, it still just feels average. Because when something feels normal, it just feels kind of average. Not really ever very exceptional. And so this is what I've been thinking about a lot. It's like the same mechanism to help you get what you want is the same mechanism that can also make you feel like you are never enough, or you are never doing enough, or you haven't achieved enough, or whatever. And this is the thing that separates human beings from other species. Like we are not just hardwired for survival, we are also hardwired for evolution and growth. There aren't really any other species that are like that. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It's why we've been able to create this modern world that we live in. It's why I live in this wonderful house. It's why I can just press a button to turn on my fire and not have to like rub the sticks together and everything. Like it's why we live in this amazingly modern and comfortable world. It's part of the reason why we're on the top of the food chain. You know, take a squirrel. Squirrels are not hardwired like this. This is something that's specific to us, but because of that, when we achieve our goals, when we grow and when we evolve, sometimes it never fully feels like we arrive at our destination. It never fully feels like we've made it. It's almost like we can never get to that point where everything finally feels good. And it's because once we reach the next level, then all of a sudden we see that there's another level above that, right? If I'm going from level 4 to level 5 Jillz, once I'm at level 5 Jillz, all of a sudden I see that there's a level 6. And once I see that there's a level 6, I want that level 6. And that's because as human beings, we desire growth. And then if we do try to normalize something, let's say that we're currently making $60,000 a year, but we want to manifest and normalize making $100,000 a year, right? When we want to manifest something, our internal world has to shift first before we start to see a change in our external reality. So you have to normalize that $100,000 before you actually make it yet. But what happens is when we're sitting at 60K, but we've all of a sudden we've normalized that 100K, you don't just feel average, you actually start to feel a little bit less than average. And this is something that I think that a lot of people haven't talked about, and something that I've had to figure out on my manifestation and growth journey is like, when you are on that precipice of manifesting something new and you know it's coming, but you're not there yet, it can be this really uncomfortable feeling because you feel like you should be there, but for some reason you're not. The point that I'm trying to make is that normalizing the things that we want and normalizing the type of person we want to become, whether it's really wealthy or really fit or really successful in whatever you deem as success, because we subconsciously have to normalize those things to get them. Sometimes when we actually get them, it doesn't feel all that crazy exciting. It just feels average because normal feels average. So like I said, this series is not for me to like have this fully scripted, thing out where I tell you exactly what to do step 1, 2, 3, and you're good to go. Like, this series is very much like how I would chat with a friend about something that I'm thinking about. And I might not always have the answers, but I do want to talk about how I have been able to sort of like fix this issue or just look at it differently. Like, honestly, the biggest thing for me is just realizing that this normalization process can also sometimes give you those feelings of average or things just feeling boring. And because humans are hardwired for growth and evolution, like, we will always want more. Once we reach level 10, then we're gonna see level 11 and we're gonna want it. And this is just a part of the human condition. And this is a part of what makes me and what makes you a successful human being. But that doesn't mean that we have to take like the crappy part of it and the part of us that doesn't make us feel very good. We don't have to take that and fully embody it. We can choose to embody the highest parts of this mechanism to get what we want, and we can try our best to let go of the rest, or just see it as like, this is just sometimes a part of the process. It doesn't mean that there's something like wrong with me. It doesn't mean that there's something necessarily wrong with my brain. It doesn't mean that I'm necessarily not achieving enough. It's just because, oh my gosh, I've normalized this step. Like, I would use this feeling almost of like not quite feeling good enough as like, wow, I've normalized this. And you can almost see that as like a win as opposed to a loss. And even in like manifestation, and it doesn't have to be just like manifestation, but anything that you want in life or any type of person you want to become, we can see this like leveling up process with ourselves and with our lives as like this fun little game. It doesn't have to be something that's so serious. Like, we're all just here to experience life and live life and experience what it's like to be a human. And one day, and not to be morbid, but one day we're all gonna die. And one day your grandchildren are no longer gonna be here either. And your grandchildren's grandchildren are not gonna be here either. And we are just gonna be like a speck of dust. We just have to see our time here as this like fun little experience. We don't have to level up. We don't have to be this type of person. We get to experience this evolutionary type of process and growth and change type of process throughout our lives. It's something that we have the privilege to experience. We have the privilege of being able to experience different versions of ourselves. And I think something that's important to ask is like, when you look back on the prior versions of yourself, so let's say I'm at level 5 Jillz and I look back on level 2 Jillz. If I look at her and I think about her and I think, oh, gross, like she sucked, she was a terrible person, I'm embarrassed by her, then that's a really harsh way to go about life. But if I look at my level 3 self as like, aw, like almost kind of cute, then this growth process becomes a lot more lighthearted and a lot more loving and a lot more fun. And I can guarantee you that if you are looking down on your past self and you are embarrassed by her, you're shamed by her, you're like, oh, disgusting, I can pretty much guarantee you that you're probably still doing that to the version of yourself today. Whereas if you're able to look back on your past self and think, oh, what a little cutie, she just didn't know any better at the time, then there's a really big chance that you probably speak very kindly to yourself, like today, your version of yourself today. And there's a lot of very, very, very high achievers who actually have very low self-esteem, and they use that low self-esteem to get what they want. Like, they use that low self-esteem to push them to achieve so that they can prove to themselves or prove to the people around them that they are worthy. But what happens when they get there is their inner world still feels exactly the same. They still don't feel good in who they are. They still feel self-conscious and uncomfortable in who they are. So that low self-esteem might have honestly helped them get to where they want to go, but that doesn't mean that they're actually going to be happy when they get there. And that's the thing, is that you're not just going to all of a sudden feel happy and all of a sudden feel whole when you arrive at your destination, because you will never, ever truly arrive at your destination, because there's always more. You're finally able to pay for that plane ticket to Europe, but then you want to manifest flying on that plane in first class. So then you do it, you fly first class. But then once you start flying first class, you're like, oh, well, I want to manifest my own private charter. Like, I want to fly my own plane. And then you get this private charter to fly you to Europe. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, but I want a private jet, right? And it's just like, it keeps going, it keeps going. There's always the next level. So I think it's like, are you choosing to evolve because you see the fun in it? You see the play in it? You see it as you connecting to your highest self? Or do you do it out of desperation because you still hear that 8th grade bully sometimes in your head? Or you still hear your dad yelling at you sometimes in your head? There's a part of this whole process with the manifestation process, the level up process, and the normalization process is that you can enjoy while you're at, while still wanting more. You can enjoy your cute little apartment with like your little tea lights up and stuff, while still wanting a big house with a big backyard. You can so badly want a relationship and to like find your husband, but you can also still so thoroughly enjoy this extra time that you get to spend with yourself and taking care of yourself and spending time with your girlfriends. This process of normalizing things and normalizing to get what you want, it's so powerful. It's one of my biggest tips for manifesting the life you want. But you don't need to approach it as like, oh, this thing that I'm normalizing, this thing that I'm trying to manifest, this is good and everything else is bad. Because all of a sudden that makes you bad, right? Like, you can hold space for two things at once. Something can be normal, something can be like, this is gonna be your life, but you can still enjoy where you're at now. You can enjoy the whole process in getting there. Instead of that normalization process making you feel like bad about yourself, like you're not good enough, you can use that normalization process or that mechanism to like get excited. Like, once you feel like you have normalized that next level, but you're not there yet, like I said, it's really uncomfortable, use that period of time as like excitement. Use that period of time to cherish those last moments you have with yourself, with your current reality, before you move on, because eventually you will. Like I said, my thoughts are kind of all over the place and I don't have this like strategically worked out in my head, but I wanted to share just all the things that I've been thinking about on this topic for the past like few months. Because I've even noticed this for myself. Like, I've gotten pretty good at like manifestation and stuff, and a lot of things that I wanted that I never thought that I could have easily come into my life eventually. And part of that is because I was able to normalize those things. Like, I'm not trying to like, you know, be like, oh, high and mighty, like look at me or anything. But like, one big thing is that like I hate flying on planes. Like, they give me anxiety. And so I really wanted to only ever fly business when flying internationally. And I've done that. Like, it's just, it has come to fruition in my life over the past 2 years. And let me tell you, it's way better, especially if you have flight anxiety, because you just have like so much more space and it feels so much better. But there's this uncomfortable period where you've normalized something, but you don't yet have it yet. It's uncomfortable and it feels weird and it feels like your life is not good enough. And I realized that like, I started to feel this way during these like level up processes, manifestation processes, whatever, because I was like taking it too seriously. I was like stressing about like, I need this thing, I have to have this thing. But like, again, we are just here to experience life. We have the privilege of being able to experience this growth process. This is a fun thing. And once I started fully seeing this as just like fun, like, oh boy, like what's the next journey? It made it so I wasn't like disliking my current self or my current reality. It was where I was just like excited for the next one, where you're like excited for the next show in a series to come on, you know? Again, my thoughts are not fleshed out, but this is kind of what this series is for. Like, I just want to casually chat. I love the fire. Like, I love this vibe. I hope you guys like it as well. Let me know if you guys like this vibe and if you want to see this series throughout the fall and the winter. I think it's cute and I'm here for it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on this topic, and I do hope that it helped you in some way, or maybe helped you to look at things a little bit differently. So thanks for joining me in my first ever fireside series, and I will see you next time in the next one. Bye.